Hello and welcome. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter. Hello to Lori. I'm so glad that you're here. Aloha. And hello to Rochelle. Welcome, welcome, ladies. Hello, Jan. Hi, my fellow cruiser. We had a great time on the cruise. I'm going to give you an update on that. Let us know in the chat what you have been up to since we were last together. Hello, Vera. I'm so glad that you're here watching from Utah. And hello, Nadia. So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. Well, we're going to talk about improv quilts, but of course, you know that I have some updates for you, and I'm sure you're anxious to know how the cruise was. The cruise was fantastic. We had a wonderful time, and I love that the classes started off the cruise. We started sailing toward the Caribbean Sea, and we had two wonderful classes before we hit five ports. And guess what we saw when we started to sail out of Fort Lauderdale? We saw a rainbow. Let me share some photos. Share some photos. This is the rainbow from the cruise ship. Me and another teacher, Guyleen, we were up at the top deck as we were setting sail. It was amazing to see a rainbow, and I took it as a sign. I took it as a sign. Hello, Jacqueline. So glad that you're here, that we would have an amazing time. And we did. Yes, Jan, you saw the rainbow too? Yes, it was wonderful to start the trip this way. We had so much fun. The ladies were amazing, very social, very engaged. We had three classes, meaning one each time we were at sea, and then we also had open sew in the evening. And when we were at ports, we did a scavenger hunt. Yes, let me show you some more photos. So let's see some more photos. This is when we were at port, one of the destinations. This is the Holland America, Rotterdam. Oh my goodness. Lovely ship. Wasn't too big, wasn't too small. Nothing was ever crowded except the first day. Everyone's, scrambling to get their luggage and what have you. But after that, oh, smooth sailing. It was fantastic. What else? Oh, I worked. Remember, this was a working cruise for me. I had some relaxing days where I was on the top deck 12 in the observation in the forward part of the ship. Every time they went to the port, that's the part that would face the island, and it gave us panoramic view, which was perfect for me to do my computer work. It was wonderful. I was very relaxed. Now, I worked, but I didn't work like I work here at home. It was a relaxed pace. Let's see some more photos. Oh, did you know that with cruising, there's this thing about ducks, which I had no clue about? One of the students, her and her mom bought purple ducks for all of us. We all received a purple duck. And apparently, this is a cruise thing where you either look for ducks, find ducks, give out ducks. I don't know the complete story, but my sister was telling me about it. And I said, oh, that's why we received the purple duck. So I decided to take pictures of the duck at different parts of the ship. And quilters were encouraged to go find that spot on the ship and take a selfie with the duck. And many ladies did. It was a scavenger hunt of sorts. So it made it really fun and interesting. And a lot of ladies would find the duck and take a picture with it. And I gave them a small prize. Do you remember those embroidered bookmarks that I made? That's what I gave. I gave them something that I made. Yes. Now, we had on the very last sail day, which was our return home, was my Sea and Sky Strata class. And boy, oh boy, did we have fun with that too. Ladies love painting the fabric with pencils, with the Inktense pencils, and then putting water on it to blend out the colors and make beautiful rainbow of colors based on a sunset photo that they took on the cruise. And so ladies had fun doing that. It was really great to have this class at the end of the trip because it was very relaxing. It was, you're coloring like you're coloring in a coloring book, and ladies really had a great time. And of course, in the beginning of the cruise, we had the machine classes, the peaceful portrait. I have to tell you, there were a couple ladies who had never done free motion quilting, and they decided to free motion quilt the face. And I was a little nervous, but excited at the same time. They weren't afraid to give it a try, and they did fantastic. Now, this is where the evening open sew time came in handy. Since we had the classes at the beginning, ladies were able to, in the evening, on the port days, come in to the classroom and continue finishing their peaceful portrait. And they had a great time doing that. And here is one. I want to brag about Janet. Janet, first time free motion. She's free motioned the face. She did all the decorative stitching during the evening time with the open sew. She did a wonderful job. Oh my goodness. I was so pleased that she and Jan, who's watching from YouTube, both were in the class. They're friends, and the two of them took all three of the classes that I taught, and I was so pleased to have them in the class because they were determined to learn free motion quilting, to learn ruler quilting, and to do the sea and sky strata. So that was really fun. We had a great time. She did a wonderful job. And this is another image inside the sewing room. We had 40 machines altogether, different types. So ladies got a chance to experience different types of sewing machines for quilting, for piecing, for free motion quilting, for ruler quilting. It was so much fun, ladies. We had a great time on the cruise. And guess what? We are going to plan, the three of us, Guyleen Fitzgerald, Latifa Safir, and myself, we're going to do it again because it was such a wonderful time. We had games also, left, right, and center with ugly fabric. We had the scavenger hunt, the open sew. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. So, what else is going on? Do I see anything in the chat about what you have been up to? I just got back just a few days ago from the cruise, and I've been scrambling to get things together for some upcoming virtual classes, which many of you are signed into. So, I can't wait for you to join me in this new resource that I'm providing for quilters, and that is virtual learning on Saturdays, 4 hours from 12 noon to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you can join, come on, join. The classes are ongoing. So if you don't have an opportunity to join one because the date doesn't work for your schedule, I'm going to repeat the class. So get on the email list. What are those classes? Well, the one coming up is the snowflake. Now, I did the snowflake before I left for the cruise, the Saturday before. And so now it's going to repeat, just like I said, in December. So go check it out on the website. Snowflake Template, it's an acrylic ruler where you learn how to make fun designs like this one. We're going to do snowflakes, but we're also going to do borders. And we're going to do designs like this one. I love this one. This is so fun. This acrylic ruler is so versatile. You can put it in almost any kind of quilt. Traditional quilt, modern quilt, art quilt. Really, it's just limited by your imagination. Here are a couple examples of how I've used it. I used it on a bed runner. I've used it on a quilt block. It's really a fun template. Let's see what's happening. Hello, Catherine. So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. And hello, Brenda from Michigan. So glad that you're here. So, what else is happening on the virtual learning front? Peaceful Portrait. Now, you saw that Peaceful Portrait was a class on the cruise. It's been so popular, so many have been asking for it. It's now also a virtual class, and I'm teaching that in January. It's going to be through Quilt Fest. You can also do what Jan and Janet did. You can also work on your peaceful portrait. Learn some free motion quilting techniques, learn some hand stitching techniques, and have fun with decorative stitching. It's really a great way to learn three different techniques in one project. So that's with Quilt Fest. Just visit my website and you will find it under events, and it's Quilt Fest Virtual Schoolhouse. Virtual Schoolhouse. Now, that's not the only class, Peaceful Portrait. There's a second one. The second is a free motion class. It's learning the popular design spirals, but then taking it up a notch, actually several notches, because I'm going to show you several different ways, variations that you can make with spirals. Then we're going to make a quilting plan, because I know some of us have been practicing free motion quilting and we don't know how to take those designs that we've been practicing and put them in a quilt. So part of the class is creating a quilting plan in with the spirals to put it in the Radiant Star quilt. So we're going to learn patterns like this spiral, and we're going to learn patterns like this spiral. I'm going to show you all of these techniques for beautiful spirals, and then we're going to put it in the Radiant Star quilt. So there are a lot of options, ladies, in terms of what you want to do next in your machine quilting journey. If you are here for the first time and you're just meeting me, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My specialty is free motion quilting and ruler quilting. I love, love, love to help ladies go from frustration to fabulous by helping them learn and develop machine quilting techniques, free motion, and ruler quilting. Who else has arrived? Hello, Jacqueline. Oh, that's right. Jacqueline was in the first Snowflake virtual class. She loved it, she says. She learned those designs that I just showed you, and they were not hard. Were they, Jacqueline? Were they hard? No, I don't think so. Once I showed you how to read the lines in the ruler, how to mark on your fabric, you will be like this. You start slow and then you skyrocket in the class. That's how I like to do it. So let's see, what else do I have to share with you in terms of updates? I think that's it. I think those are all the updates. The cruise, which was wonderful, the virtual classes that are all coming up. And now we're going to talk about improv quilts. We did talk about improvisational ruler quilting, which is a virtual class tomorrow. For those of you who are going to be there tomorrow, I can't wait to share with you improvisational ruler quilting. Tonight, we're going to talk about improv quilts. And what does that mean? Who can give a definition in the chat of what an improv quilt is? What do you think it is? I have a definition that I looked up. I asked on my phone, I talked to Siri. I said, Siri, give me a definition of improvisational quilts. And she found a reference on the internet from the Quilt Show. A lot of you might be familiar with the Quilt Show with Alex Anderson and Ricky Timms. I think those are the two hosts. So they give a definition. But before I share it, I'd be curious to know, what is your definition of improvisational quilts? What is your definition? And I will check the comments to see if I missed anyone, some new guests that are watching with us. I'm scrolling through. I did say hello to Vera and Rochelle and Lori, Jacqueline. I'm so glad you ladies are all here. It seems like it's been a long time since we've been together, but I know it's only been a couple of weeks. On the spot. Yes. Uh oh. Jacqueline says I put her on the spot. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's read the definition. I'll read it. According to the Quilt Show, an improvisational quilt is a quilt made without specific intention, a style of the modern quilter. Most improvisational or improv quilts just begin, not with a concept necessarily, but grows out of the improv piecing and develops as the quilter stitches. Each quilter has their own style, which I love that. Method and motivation. While quilters' approach will refer to as improv piecing, often it's easy to tell the unique style and approaches taken. Like improv piecing, there are no rules or boundaries, and it is as much a style as it is an attitude. Changing as you go. I like that. Changing as you go. Oh, I'm sorry, Jacqueline. Okay, I see what you're saying now. No, I said improve means on the spot. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Pat. Your definition for improv. Now, I love the part of their definition that says it's unique to the quilter and it's no rules, no boundaries. And years ago, a friend of mine used to call me a quilter that used no pattern. She called my quilts Dina's patternless creations. Say that 3 times fast. And that's what I did. In my early days, I did not use patterns. I just kind of found a block and I would try the block out, then I'd make my own changes to it and then assemble more blocks based on those changes. And that's pretty much what I did before I started designing for magazines. But now I want to get into a little bit more of that. And I was inspired recently when I stumbled upon Angee Turner. She is an amazing quilter. I have a surprise for you, ladies. We have a guest tonight. Angee Turner is an amazing quilt designer and teacher. She has beautiful quilts that include improv, but she also does other styles. Let me share a little bit with you about Angee. She is from St. Louis. She's a fiber artist. She's self-taught and a second-generation quilt maker. Angee has been sewing since childhood. She was initially inspired by a quilt crafted by her paternal grandmother. Her quilts, Angee's quilts, are a blend of bright, saturated colors and intricate geometric piecing. Often she draws her inspiration for color from tropical birds. Her first solo exhibition was held at the Jacoby Art Center in Alton, Illinois. Her quilts have been showcased in the South Bend Museum of Art, St. Louis Lambert International Airport Art of Travel Exhibition, Portfolio Gallery, the St. Louis Artists Guild, and Maryville University. Angee also teaches improv in addition to other techniques. I am pleased, very pleased to have Angee Turner with us tonight. Give her a warm welcome.
Hello, Geraldine. It's so nice to be with you. I've been
Hello,
looking forward to this.
Angee. Finally, I'm so
I
excited.
know, finally.
I'm so glad that you're here. Now, I've given a brief history. Share more about how you became a sewer at such a young age. How old were you,
Mm.
and why did you
Oh.
choose quilts?
Well, I started sewing because I went to Catholic school my whole life. And I wanted some clothes, and my mother said, sew or be naked. And she meant it. My mom and dad, spent a lot of money, hard work and money to make sure my sister and I had, a really good education. So we had uniforms, good pair of shoes, good coats to wear, but regular clothes they were not going to splurge with. So I learned how to sew. So I knew that if I asked for fabric, they would buy it. So that's why I learned to sew.
So then, how did you migrate from sewing clothing to making a quilt? Tell us about that first quilt that inspired you.
Well, my paternal grandmother lived in Michigan, and so I really didn't know her very well. But every few years, you would get a quilt in the mail, and it was usually wrapped in a grocery bag with a white string tied around it. And it would have your name on it, and so you'd get this package, and it was just magical to me that she could take these pieces of fabric and make something so beautiful. So I grew up always having quilts on the bed. And so when I had my first apartment, I had this quilt that had been on the bed for so long and it was falling apart and I was sewing it back together again. So I took some scraps that I had from my sewing projects and I thought, what if I replicate this? So I spent a day cutting squares and I made, 2 by 2 squares and then sewed those together. And before I knew it, I had something that was so large, I had to move my living room table and chairs out of the way because it filled up the entire space. And not knowing what to do, I went to a quilt store and told the woman, I have this something, and how do I make a quilt out of it? And so she told me that I needed batting and she sewed me fabric for the backing. And I quilted a king size quilt on my little machine that I was used to sewing clothes on and I shoved it through. And so I just had straight lines. And from there, I thought, oh, this is great. And I've been obsessed ever since.
Wow, that's an amazing story. What precious gifts your grandmother gave you that you then proceeded to be inspired by. That's just
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. I love the story. Now, you have a very interesting take on color, though. How did
Mm-hmm.
that develop? You mentioned that you're inspired by tropical birds.
Yes. I mean, they have such brilliant colors, and the combinations are so intriguing. So I might see a picture of a bird, and I think, oh, what colors are those? And so I'll take a photograph or I'll make a copy of it. And I have a preferred color stash. There are colors that I naturally gravitate to. So I try to usually use as many colors as I possibly can in a quilt, but I always have a limitation. I don't use the entire rainbow, but I'll remove a color. I'll say I'll use all the colors, but I won't use red, or I won't use black and green. So there's always a limitation, and I think that goes back to my thought of when our grandmothers and grandfathers were quilting. They didn't have every color that they wanted, and they used what they had. So I tend to use what I have. And so I don't, I try to think, don't make it perfect, remove something and see where you can progress from there.
That is a very interesting approach to decide, even though I have access to a rainbow of colors,
Mm-hmm.
hues, and tones, that you challenge yourself creatively by removing colors. That
Mm-hmm.
is very, very interesting. Now,
Or
I
not just
also,
removing, sometimes just saying, I'm just going to use these. I'm going to use every red I have, or I'm going to use every green I have. So it's a matter of, it's addition and subtraction kind of at the same time.
okay. Hmm, that's interesting. Now, how did you get started with being in exhibitions, going from making a replica of your grandmother's quilt to showcasing your quilts?
It simply was a matter of showing my quilts on Instagram and Facebook, not having any purpose, just saying, I made this. Do you like it? And people started to respond to it. And then I was invited to show my quilts in exhibitions. So it's nothing that I actually went out and pursued. People came to me because I was willing to share what I make. And if people ask me questions about how did you do that, I usually tell them how. And I like to share. I think it's because I was a teacher for 30 years. This is my natural inclinations to share what I know with someone else.
Well, that's wonderful. I think often when we create from our own heart and desire, that then becomes something that people are attracted to. It's not necessarily a repeat of something else. It's new inspiration. So, your grandmother's style, was it traditional or improv? How did you move from one technique to the other?
Oh, she was traditional, but she always had a little twist to it. I could see the patterns that she was following, but she always did a little something different. She would turn a block a different way, or instead of a half triangle or a half was it half triangle square, it would be a diamond. She would do something to make it individual, to make it hers. And so that
Ah.
was the inspiration. She didn't just follow the pattern. She said, I'm going to take this pattern, but I'm going to make it mine. And I think I've carried that on in my own work.
Well, that is inspiring because, in some way, maybe she didn't know, or did she know, that she was teaching from afar just by virtue of sending her quilts. You were curious.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very
So,
curious about it. It was fun.
yeah, I find that very interesting too, because often we can be mentored by different artists. They don't even know that they're
Hmm.
mentoring us because
True.
we've been inspired by their work, and we say, well, I want to try something similar, or I want to learn to do what they do. They say have the same kind of freedom, which it sounds like your grandmother had this freedom to say, I like this pattern, but I want to create something that's unique to me, and I'm going to do
Yes.
something different.
Hmm.
Yes. So, one thing that I was curious about, let's start looking at some quilts, and then we can get some more
Okay.
ideas about your design process and your love of fabric.
Yes. Love, 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 love of fabric. This is my Transcendent Kingdoms quilt. This was made from several, many, many, many uh, quilt square or quilt fat quarters that I got from Cultured Expressions fabric store in Rahway, New Jersey. I usually buy in bulk. I say, "Oh, I need 80 square. I need 80 of these." So she'll send me 80. And so my purpose was, or my intention was, to use a piece of everything. So if I had 80 pieces of fabric, I wanted to use all 80 of them in this quilt. But to make it simple, if you can call this simple, I just used a regular, it's a simple, traditional block. So it's nothing, the block itself isn't fancy. The fabric is telling the story. And I originally had the blocks sewn right next to each other, but I figured that it wasn't as impactful to me. It just seemed like a lot of chaos. So I had that black and white striped fabric in my stash, and I made those strips as the sashing, excuse me. And so I think it's really interesting that the stripes are not perfectly horizontal and vertical. So it gives you the sense of motion and encourages your eye to move all around the quilt. And the back of this one has probably as many pieces of fabric as the front, but they're just simple rectangles sewn together. And the back took me just as long to make as the front.
Wow, I love it. I love the sashing and borders that you used on this. The black and white really sets off the color. It actually helps, I
Yes.
think, the color pop more instead of it being too blended. And I love the idea of the movement by not having it perfectly lined up. That is
Hmm.
a, a wonderful idea. I love that
Thanks.
idea. So, when you have this many fabrics with various
Mhm.
tones and values and combinations of colors, did you do any subtraction or addition, or did you just use what she sent you for this particular project?
I used what she sent me, and I didn't pay too much attention to value. There may be some darker colors next to other darker colors, and I just went with it. Sometimes I would just turn it around because sometimes there were too many dark stripes on one side, so I would pivot and turn the block around. But this was just, I guess you'd call this a kitchen sink quilt, in that I just threw everything in and just let it talk to me and tell me where it wanted to go.
So then, in some ways, as you were making each block, it was somewhat improvisational. You just would
Mhm.
pick a piece, turn it around, put it on, but you weren't thinking value or anything. You were thinking just
No.
what was appealing.
Yes. It goes back to that definition you talked about earlier, what improv is. I always tell people that improv is decisions, decisions, decisions.
I
Because
like
when you're
that.
making something traditional, you already have answered those questions. You know what shapes you're going to use, you know what colors you're going to use, you know what the design is going to look like. But with improv, it's just you start with an idea and then you make a decision. And then you make another decision, you make another decision, and you don't know where you're going to end up until you've asked questions and answered them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Decisions, decisions. Let's look at another one.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, the yellow brick road less traveled. Now, this one I actually made for my mom when she was sick. I spent time with her at the hospital, and I would hand sew these squares together. And she would sit in her hospital bed and she'd say, what in the world are you doing? Because she did not quilt at all. She didn't like it. She made one quilt and said never again.
Oh.
But But I spent lots of time with this because she loved yellows and golds and greens and very jewel toned colors. So I made this for her, but unfortunately she never saw it finished. And once I
Oh.
finished it, I put it aside for about 7 or 8 years until I found someone who I trusted to finish it for me. So she did beautiful on this.
Oh. Wow.
Sure.
Wow. Wow. It's lovely. I'm
Thank you.
intrigued by it. There's so many things that keep your eye on the quilt moving about, not just the curves, but the colors. You have a very strong skill in combining various colors and values to keep the viewer interested in what they're looking at. I love it for many reasons.
Thank you. I don't like symmetry, but I do love balance.
Ah,
So
tell
so
us the
I do
difference
pay
between the two.
attention. Symmetry would mean you have the same on one side that you have on the other. But balance means if I have a lot of reds on one side, I want to balance it on the other side with lots of reds. Or if they're darker colors to one side, I want to balance it on the other side. So I want the eye to always be moving around the quilt, and I want you to see something today that you didn't see yesterday when you looked at it. I always want there to be a surprise, or you see one of my quilts one day, but then you see it again 2 years later and you think, oh, I never noticed that was there. So there's always got to be something interesting for the viewer from my perspective.
Wow, well, this certainly is one of those that I just keep looking at it and looking at it and seeing something different about it. Yeah,
Thank you.
I love it. All right, let's look at another one.
Oh, brighter days ahead. This one was a commission for a young lady who was graduating from high school, and she loved bright colors. And I wanted to encourage her to go out in the world and and just be bold and be brave and be fearless and live a great life. So that's where this came from. It's a matter of how
Beautiful.
bright can I make it. So I
And
think
what
this is
was
a good example of balance too. If you look at the dark backgrounds versus lighter backgrounds, you can kind of see where I scattered the darks and lights around so that your eye is always moving.
that is so true between the yellows and the orange, the midtones, and then the darker
Hmm.
colors. You can see that it's not weighted on one side or top or bottom. There is a balance in terms of how the color is around the entire quilt.
Hmm.
What was her reaction when she received it?
I think she was a little overwhelmed because she knew it was coming, but she didn't know exactly what it was going to be. And when I gave it to her, or when her mom gave it to her, she just sort of went, wow. But mom did not let her take it to college. Mom said it had to stay at home.
Oh, thank you, Mom. All right. That means hopefully she still has it and it's intact.
Yes,
Yes, and it wasn't missing, which can happen
yes,
at a university. Okay,
that's
let's look at
true.
this one.
Oh, this is Barago's quilt. This is actually the young lady's brother's quilt. When he graduated from high school, this is the quilt that he got.
Wow. Boy, these
So
are
this
lucky kids. Go ahead.
I know all three of the kids have gotten a quilt from me, but this one kind of reminds you of the Yellow Brick Road quilt, in that there's a maze, and this one talks about coming home. You're always welcome to come home. So no matter which way you travel, you can always make it back home, because
Oh,
life will take you in many different directions, but you can
oh.
always come home.
I love that. I mean, I've always loved this quilt when I first saw it, and I've always gone back to it and would keep looking at it. But now with the story with it, it just makes the quilt so special. Tell us about the color choices. These are really bold colors. And why did you choose black for the path as opposed to another color?
I chose black because I just thought it would stand out. It would be bold. And a this quilt also has a combination of um, open seaming and or open pressing and pressing to one side. The black strips are the seams where the black strips are. They're pressed to the dark so that it makes the lines come out at you. Because even though there's a slight difference, it gives you a three-dimensional quality. And I just thought the black was bold, because you can see the colors, but you also see the the lines. And I just thought it was intriguing.
When I look at it, it it has a three-dimensional quality. I see the squares in the back, and then I see the black, and then sometimes it goes back and forth. Sometimes I'm looking
Yes.
at the path of the black, then I'm looking at the squares, then I'm looking at both. It really is an
Hmm.
interactive quilt.
Good. I'm glad it worked that way. That was how
Yeah.
I intended it. Yeah.
Yeah, ladies are loving it in the chat. Eileen says it's awesome, awesome work, and Vera,
Thank you so much.
yeah, she loves your quilts. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your beautiful memory, she says. Yes. So
Thank you.
let's look
Thank you.
at another, and we'll have time for a Q&A, ladies. If you, so get your questions ready if you have questions for Andy about her
I
design
love
techniques
questions.
and color choices. Now this one, wow.
this one is quite this was quite amazing, and I didn't know how amazing it was until I saw it hanging on the wall. This is one that is hanging right now at the South Bend Museum of Art. And I made the top a year or two ago, and I didn't finish it until this year. And I was hurrying to get it to South Bend, Indiana by the deadline. And so I really didn't see it finished and calmly until I went to the opening, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. Now
Oh, that's
these are all
wonderful.
scraps. These are scraps from projects.
Wow.
I
That's a
wanted to make I wanted to make a star, but I didn't want to make the traditional star. I wanted it to be a circle. And so it was one of those ideas where I was lying in bed saying, "How could I do this?" I had the idea and I wasn't sure how to accomplish it. And so I just I just figured it out. I will wake up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock because I had an idea, and I'll write it down, or I'll go in my studio and turn things around on the design wall because I'm always thinking about making a quilt or designing a quilt or finishing a quilt. It's an obsession. It's a good obsession, I think.
Yes, yes, I think so as well. Now, I'm
I think you have an
curious.
obsession too.
Yes, I do. I do. Now, you mentioned that this was scraps and you
Hmm.
were thinking about how to make a star and how to make it different and circular. How do you capture those thoughts? Do you write it in a book? Do you use software? How
Yes.
did you design this? Do you pencil draw it? How do you do it?
I have notebooks where I draw an idea, I sketch an idea, or I see something online and I make a copy and I shove it in the pages of the notebook. So this was actually an idea that came to me probably 3 or 4 years ago, but I didn't actually accomplish it until a couple of years later. Because I had to figure out how I was going to do it.
I love that. That's a good point. In this drive through, have to have it in 5 minutes mentality,
Hmm.
sometimes quilters don't realize, young quilters perhaps, that creating is a process and that sometimes it can take years. We can have a general idea of something, but we haven't figured
Hmm.
out the fabric or the colors or how we're going to put it together. And it's okay. Al-
Yes.
Allow the process to happen over time.
I'm
And
very process oriented. I love the process of quilting. I love the process just as much as I like to have a finished quilt.
I think I'm the same way. I do enjoy the process. And I think, similar to you, that when I get stuck, I just let it sit and then I'll just
Hmm.
think about it. And I'll be in bed thinking about it and visualizing and thinking, I'll try that in the morning. It may or may not be the answer, but then I'll go over it again and just see what happens.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
this is just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone is loving it. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning. Everyone is saying. Now,
Thank you so much.
everyone. Oh, Cassie says yes, the process. She enjoys it too. Cassie is a regular
Hmm.
here on Quilt Conversations Live. Thank you, Cassie. So, wait, not this one. I want to show this one next. This one here.
The eye of the
I
needle.
Eye of the Needle. My, your
Hmm.
titles are just amazing. There's a story behind it. What is the story?
This one I made because I was inspired by the book that title has not escaped me. The Improv Handbook. The Improv Handbook by Sherry Lynn Wood.
Yes.
I I made the quilt because I saw one that she had made in the book and I thought, "Oh, let me try this." So of course I took scraps that I had in my stash and cut the strips. And so I made all of those bands and I didn't know how I was going to put them together. But the bands are hand sewn to each other. So the individual strips are pieced on the machine, but the actual bands are hand sewn, and then they're all, let's see, I think, oh, they're hand sewn to the background. And then I did the machine quilting on top. So this one has a lot of hand stitching in it. And I didn't have any plan as to how the layout was going to work. I just tried it and saw what happened. And if I didn't like it, I turned it around or I flipped it the other way. So I'm not afraid to, as they say, make a mistake. it's just a learning opportunity, and I will rip out stitches if it's not working for me.
I like
I have
that
no
as
I
well.
have no fear of the seam ripper.
That's wonderful. I will do that too in my process. But one thing that I'm curious about is that you mentioned machine stitching and hand stitching.
Hmm.
When do you decide to hand stitch versus machine stitch?
I will hand stitch if I think I need the control, because with this fabric, there's a lot of bias edges. And so I have more control of the fabric when I'm hand sewing versus when I machine sew. Now I consider myself a master of my sewing machine, but sometimes I really want to put my hand in it, and I think I have more control over how the fabric will lie, on top of each other.
Okay, that's something to consider. I'm mostly a machine stitcher. It's rare that I hand stitch, but now that you mention that, it makes me want to consider learning how to hand stitch for that
Mhm.
control. And I can
I
see with
think
all those
because
curves.
Oh, excuse me. I
No, it's
think
fine.
because I spent so many years sewing clothing and having lots of experience putting in hems or doing lots of hand stitching, I'm very comfortable using hand stitches.
Ah, that prior experience with clothing has made a difference in impacting your
Hmm.
quilts.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Wow, wow. We have a question. Once
Okay.
you start working on a project, how long does it take you to get it out of your head and into real life?
Oh, wow. There are quilts that I will think of on Monday. I cut the fabric on Tuesday. I start sewing on Wednesday, and I'm finished a couple weeks later. And there are others that I have an idea and I might not start it until a couple years later. And then it might go into a box for another year or two because I haven't really worked out all of my ideas. Because sometimes I have an idea and I don't know how to sew it. And I think there's a quilt, my orange juice blues that you had coming up, and that was an example of sewing myself into a corner.
Oh, okay. Let's bring that up to the front then. Let's talk about orange juice blues. I love
Yeah,
it. That's a
orange juice blues. I made several improv boxes. So there were just lots of boxes of orange and blue fabrics. And then I didn't know how I was going to put them all together. So I would join some together and take some loose, and you know how you add on or cut off. So this was a matter of adding on and cutting off and adding on and cutting off and adding on and cutting off. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And I think improv is decisions, 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 and you think, where am I going to go with this? And so it's a jigsaw puzzle. So there are
wow.
lots and lots of rectangles in this, and it's very easy, but it's complicated at the same time.
Yeah, I would think so, especially if you're adding and subtracting, and as you're doing that, it's taking undetermined shape,
Mm-hmm.
right? You might think it's going
Yes.
one way, but it can go another way.
Yes.
Well,
And
it's
it
lovely.
might be a square. You might think it's going to be a square and it becomes a rectangle, or you think it's going to be a rectangle and it becomes a circle. You don't know until the fabric talks to me. I always say that. It tells me what it wants to be.
So this process was very different than the previous quilts. Is this a process that you enjoy as well? This adding and subtracting and the increased unknown.
Yes, I like not knowing where I'm going to end up. And this was an example too of having a limitation. I had very little of the blue batik fabric.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think there are 11 oranges in this quilt. I think there are 11 different orange colors or hues. And there's only two of the batiks. They're two different batiks. One's a little bit darker than the other one. And I think I only had a fat quarter of each. So it was a matter of how can I make a quilt that is at least 5 feet square but sprinkle all of the blues somewhat evenly around the quilt and not lose the impact of the blue with so many oranges.
Wow, the balance on this is just amazing considering the process. And I heard you mention the color and hue.
Mm-hmm.
Share with our audience how you use tones and hues versus color.
Color, if you think of color, many people refer to a crayon box. You know, that Crayola crayon box. You think, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, brown, black. And you think of color. Whereas there's so many variations of color, and colors change due to lighting in the room. Color changes according to the time of day. So I try to use all of the hues within a color family. So if it's orange, and I'm very particular about colors, and I drive people crazy sometimes because I have good color memory. And someone will say it was pink. And I say, well, yes, it was pink, but it has a tinge of purple. But it's kind of like a reddish purple, but not a bluish purple. And people just think, oh my God, like here she goes. So I think of, so when I say orange, all of these oranges had to be toward the yellow side
Yes,
and not
yes,
red and not tomato. So when
right.
I'm picking colors, I want to make sure that they go together, but there is a darker orange that's a little bit more to the red side that gives you a darker tone as you're moving as your eye moves around the quilt. And there are more darker colors toward the lower half than there are at the top too.
Yes, I noticed that. And it's so interesting when you mention that you can see secondary colors with it within a color. I remember years ago when I had my porch painted by someone, and it was just the ceiling and it's beige. And I went and got
Mm-hmm.
the paint, and he's like, "Well, no, that's a beige green. You want a beige blue, or you want a beige." He was like, "No, it's the wrong color beige." I'm like, "Beige is beige."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "No,
It's
it's
like,
not."
no. It's like, have you ever tried to buy white paint?
Oh my goodness, no.
And
Yeah.
no, there are 42 white colors, white paints. Some are grayish white, some are bluish white, some are greenish white, some are brownish white. And you're thinking, oh my God, I just want a can of white paint.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah.
that sensitivity that you have to color makes your quilts stand out. And I appreciate that. It's just, they're amazing. Here's another example.
This is Black Gives Way to the Blues. This is one of my favorites. Really is one of my favorites. I love the color blue. Most of my clothes are blue. And this was another quilt that's about a limitation. I wanted to use all the blues that I had in my stash. And I think, well, what's opposite of blue on the color wheel? Orange. So I added oranges. So they're different oranges. But then I thought, well, let's add some yellow in there too. But it's just enough yellow to make an impact, but not enough yellow to be distracting.
Yeah,
So
that
again, it's
that
about it's
balance
about that
again.
balance.
It's the balance again. Yep. Now
And
we
you'll
have a
laugh about
question.
this one.
What's that?
Just something quick, you'll laugh. This
Yes.
is this is hung in a couple different exhibitions, and every time they hang it upside down.
Oh
So I
no.
made it in one direction, but everyone else hangs it the other direction, and I think it's hilarious.
Oh, okay. Now, did I have it correct on this one?
No,
Is
it doesn't matter.
okay.
It's right. No, it's right. No matter which way you hang it, it's fine.
Okay. Wait, well, we have a question from Rochelle. She says it looks like you work mostly in solids. Do you dye your own, or do you have your favorite commercial solid fabric line?
I do not dye my own fabric. That is something I have enough obsessions. I don't need any more obsessions. I don't need any more hobbies. I have enough.
So is there a
Of
particular
Kona
fabric line
cottons,
that you like?
primarily Kona cotton.
Ah, Kona
That's
cotton.
my go-to mostly. Yes, I
Mm.
use a color chart. So if I'm looking for a particular color, I will check the chart. Every now and then, I'll have a particular color or hue in mind, and I may search for it with another company. But Kona cottons are my go-to usually.
Okay, they have the variety of hues and tones that
Hmm.
you like.
Yeah, I think they're up to about 350 so far now, I think.
Oh wow, 350. Okay.
Hmm. Now this one, along with the blue one that you showed before, it's a color series. So it's a matter of I pick a color and I see how I can make it interesting to me with a limited number of hues. So this one is about gray. And gray is not a color that I wear. It's not a color that I usually work with. So this was a challenge to me to make something interesting using something that I'm not usually attracted to. And I just threw
Hmm.
red in there because I thought the grays and the whites needed something to pop. So you couldn't just use black. It had to have some other counterpoint, I guess you would call it. So that's why I ended up with this one. And this one doesn't have a name. I don't
Hmm.
know why I haven't named it yet. I'll have to think of something one day.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to hear it. So, do you have anything that you want to show us or share? We're coming toward the end of our time. It goes by so quickly.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, you were asking me earlier about my website, and I told you that my website it's
Mm.
in process. It's being built. So some of my quilts are on the website already, so you can see them close up.
All right, let's
And
go to
then,
that. This is
yeah,
the website, ladies. Go ahead.
Angie Quilts. And then I have an Etsy store. Excuse me. The Etsy store where I sell the things I make from my what's left over from my quilts. So I have,
Mm.
you'll see my sweatshirt. I
Okay,
took
let me.
some fabrics from my sweatshirt or from my quilts, and I made panels. And I sewed this on to a hoodie, and I even put there's even
Ah.
a stripe there on my sleeve. I made one and I wore it out to a friend's house, and she yelled at me in the driveway, "Oh my God, that's so fabulous! You need to make those." So I made several and sold a lot of them. So I have some remaining ones on my website, not on my website, on my Etsy page.
Etsy.
And
Okay.
then I've made puzzles from some of my
Hmm.
quilts. So there's this one, and this
Wow.
is Toxic Lemonade.
I love that name as well. Toxic Lemonade. How many pieces are in the puzzles?
There are about 500 pieces in each puzzle. So then the blue, and that's another one. This one
Wow.
this one does have this one was made from print fabrics, but mostly my work is done in solids.
And they can find all this on your Etsy shop.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, you also teach, and you are going to be
Hmm.
teaching at a big show next year. What show is
Yes,
that?
QuiltCon.
Yes, QuiltCon
QuiltCon in Phoenix next February.
next
And there I'll be
February.
teaching a class on symmetry. 11 different kinds of symmetry.
Now that is intriguing. So not only do you teach improv piecing, but now you're moving into symmetry. What sparked that transition from improv to symmetry?
Well, I like to go back and forth between traditional quilts versus improv quilts. So I was kind of inspired by the quilt that's behind me. I made this quilt for the Modern Quilt Guild about 4 years ago. And this was taking a traditional windmill block and just kind of making it a little off, making that block so that the triangle isn't a perfect isosceles triangle, just making it a little askew. And then you also have that secondary blue windmill. And so I got into how to arrange this block. And this is an example of rotational symmetry, where the block rotates along a particular point to give you that illusion of, again, of movement that I like to
Mm.
use a lot in my quilts.
Wow, and
And
the
so
class
I
is
went on,
sold out.
yes, the class is sold out,
Wow.
but I
So,
will be
ladies,
teaching it online in late March of next year.
oh, wow. So, where can ladies find out about that? The late March, is that at a guild or through your
It's going to be
website?
online. It's going to be online.
Yeah, is
So
it
if you go to my website, you can give me your email address and I'll give you some information and I'll let you know when the class will be coming up. But it'll be an online class.
okay? Online class that you're hosting. You're not giving it
Yes.
to a group. Okay, so anyone can join.
Yes, anyone can join.
Oh, okay, wonderful. All right. So, ladies, don't miss out on that opportunity. And if you're a part of a guild and you're looking for a lecture on improvs or symmetry or even a class, you also do that for groups, right?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah,
I'll do in person or online Zoom lectures.
lectures. Okay, so any last words that you'd like to share as in terms of inspiring quilters with color or improv or symmetry? What would you like to share with our audience?
I have a couple rules. First, cut the fabric. Don't save it.
Don't save it.
And I'm breaking my own rule because I have two pieces of fabric that I've had a long time that I fold and unfold, a couple of times a year because I love it so much. But cut the fabric and be fearless. Just go ahead and make the quilt. Every quilt does not have to be beautiful. It just has to be yours, you know.
Wow.
It just has
Wow.
to be yours. And I'll say if you don't like it after it's finished, cut it up, make make pot holders and give them to your friends and they'll be happy.
They will. They will. People, our friends love to receive handmade gifts. It's very personal
Yes.
and it's a good idea to do. I like that. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing and inspiring us all with your beautiful quilts.
Well, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for
Thank you.
inviting me. And I'm going to go back and start practicing my ruler work
All
because that's something
right.
that you are an expert in. So I'm going to take some of your classes and learn some free motion quilting techniques that I don't have in my repertoire.
Well, that will be great. I would love an opportunity to share with you some of the techniques that I do, just as I have been inspired by your quilts. I want to do more improv quilts. I
Hmm.
just haven't made time for it, but next year is the plan to make more time. So, thanks again. Everyone has had a wonderful time. But before I ask you um, I would like the audience to have one more opportunity to ask a question. Any questions before Angie leaves us? Cassie, Rochelle, Lori, Jacqueline. Jacqueline says that she's been inspired by you. She loves your improv. And Rochelle says, thank you for your time and inspiration. Yes, it
Well,
was
thank you so
wonderful,
much.
Cassie.
You can always email me too at angie.quilts@gmail.com if you have a question. I love questions and I like helping people to become better quilters and more confident quilters.
I like that. That is, I think, something that can hinder a lot of quilters, not just in making quilts, but even finishing them with the techniques that I teach, is that they're afraid to either make a mistake, they're afraid that it's not going to be as good as someone else's, and I don't like to encourage ladies to measure themselves by others. It's just
Oh no.
wherever you are in your journey is where you are. We all have a
Exactly.
different path. So
Exactly.
Pat says, "Thank you, beautiful quilts." We do have a question. Are you still quilting on a domestic, or do you have a long arm?
I quilt on, I do have a long arm, so I do quilt on both. The smaller ones I do quilt on my domestic machine. I have a Bernina 750, so it's a little larger quilt. I have a more open throat space,
Some
and then
space. Okay.
I have a long arm too for
Okay.
my large
Wonderful.
ones.
Good question. Good question. Well, I guess that's it then. Thanks again.
Thank you again.
And
It's been wonderful.
it has, it has, and I'd love to have you back sometime in the future. We can talk more about your symmetry quilts.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah. Take care, Angie.
Take
Thanks
care. Thank
again.
you, everybody. Quilt a lot.
Yes, quilt a lot.
Quilt a lot. Bye bye.
Bye. Well, everyone, are you inspired? I know I am. Angie's quilts are beautiful, amazing on many levels. Her ability to not only design, but to bring in different tones and hues, her choices are just amazing. And we all want to get better in some area, and better means whatever it means for you. If you want to improve in your piecing, you want to improve in your machine quilting, your choice of colors, you want to try improv quilting, there's a lot of freedom in Angie's style of quilting. It's freedom to be who you are. And that's what we both want to encourage, for you to be who you are as a quilter and to enjoy the process. Remember what she said? She enjoys the process. Let's not get hung up on rules, right? And boundaries. Let's let loose a little, right? Let's have fun with color. And I know, Rochelle, you always do color studies. So I admire that you challenge yourself, Rochelle. And thank you to Vera and thank you to Jacqueline, for everyone for being here tonight. I know we went over a little bit, but wasn't it worth it? I think it was worth it. We are going to meet it next month only once. I am doing a little bit of traveling, so I will not see you the first Friday of December. I will see you the third Friday of December. I hope you come back. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Stay safe if you're traveling. And thanks for being with us here on Quilt Conversations Live. I'll see you next time. What? Don't forget, if you are new, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so that you can be notified whenever I upload new content. And if you're watching on Facebook, follow me on Facebook and other social media so that you can continue to be inspired. I love to share machine quilting and other techniques and ideas through social media. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. See you soon.